Right now, your next news update is at 9. Chicago's Morning Answer continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
All right, believe it or not, we are almost at our goal for our Food for the Poor campaign. We need just 1 to 2 more business benefactors to cross that finish line. We're asking a one-time donation of $2,500. With that, the money will go to Food for the Poor. You'll feed 50 kids for a whole entire year. Plus, it's a great tax write-off. Plus, we'll give you 41-minute commercials that will air right here. We want to thank We the People of McHenry County, Vitality Dialysis, Tinley Park Convention Center, Mars Medical Equipment. The list goes on and on. We have 2 spots left. So be one of the cool kids. If you advertise, if you thought about advertising ever, this is the best deal in Chicagoland radio. The number to call, Anjanette, 847-472-8951, 847-472-8951, or go to 560theanswer.com/food for the poor.
I want to go back to this moment between Scott Bessent, the now confirmed Treasury Secretary, and the hapless senator from Oregon, Ron Wyden. The question of energy and the left's obsession with green energy, like the backdoor Green New Deal that was passed during the Biden administration, and the formulation that Scott Bessent provided to Ron Wyden and those senators in attendance, as well as the nation, the framing here.
Now there is a big effort in the Trump administration to reverse it. I think that's going to be bad for the economy, but it is going to be damn good for China because we are in an arms race on clean energy with them. Are you going to be on the side of people who want to unravel this?
Senator Wyden, just so we can frame this for everyone in the room, China will build 100 new coal plants this year. There is not a clean energy race. There is an energy race. China will build 10 nuclear plants this year. That is not solar. I am in favor of more nuclear plants. And I would note that the IRA, as scored by the CBO, is wildly out of control in terms of spending on the upside.
Indeed. And the perverse incentives it presents as well. We're in a energy race, not a clean energy race. And let me give you an example of the perverse incentives. Let's go back to Phil Murphy's New Jersey. Maybe not for long if Tom Homan gets his hands on Murphy, since he's harboring illegals, so he says. But anyway,
the garage.
I digress. Shell has effectively withdrawn from New Jersey's first offshore wind farm, Atlantic Shores. Shell, oil company involved in building windmills off the shores of New Jersey, is going to write off $1 billion investment to walk away from this. As James Freeman over the Wall Street Journal notes, the enthusiasm for windy boondoggles that animates Governor Phil Murphy somehow keeps getting sliced by the whooshing blade of financial reality. And, of course, there's the political reality, too, which is not only Trump calling the Atlantic Shores wind proposal dead and gone, but looking to try to claw back the hundreds of billions of dollars in spend to advance the perverse incentives like this one that I mentioned. For more on the topic, we're pleased to be joined by Mark Mills. Mark Mills is the founder and executive director of the National Center for Energy Analytics. Mark, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, Mark, are you there?
Do we have Mark Mills?
I'm right here.
Hello.
Oh, there we go.
Good morning.
There you are. Before we begin, I got to say I attended a talk that was given by Joel Ross, he of the Ross Rant for people who are subscribers. And he was effusive in singing your praises as sort of the leading authority on energy policy in the world. So you'll be happy to hear that, I'm sure.
Well, that's wonderful. I obviously paid Joel enough to be.
Well,
the truth comes out.
We didn't get into that, So anyway, what about Scott Bessent's formulation there to frame the discussion about sensible energy policy? We're in a energy race, not a clean energy race.
Well, he uses the right language, and it's been an energy race for all of human history. Let's be clear about how long the race has been on. But, we need energy. It's self-evident, and for everything, there's no product, no service, nothing that doesn't use energy, of course. The universe exists because of energy. So it's a weird domain. But obviously this debate is about the idea of transitioning away from hydrocarbons, oil, gas, and coal, to something else, mainly windmills and solar panels and batteries for cars and grids. And of course, he framed it exactly correctly. It's a race for, to use the now pilloried phrase, it's a race for energy dominance. And of course, the Saudis and the OPEC have figured out something that is still true. Oil is the single largest source of global energy. It still is, has been for a long time, by a huge factor. In fact, oil alone supplies 10 times more energy to the world than all of the planet's windmills and solar panels combined. And we've spent trillions, I don't mean billions, but Europe and the United States for the last 20 years have spent trillions of dollars to avoid using oil, gas, and coal. The net effect of that has been an increased use of wind and solar and lots more EVs, no question, a lot more than there ever were, and the use of oil, gas, and coal have all risen, not declined. They've all risen dramatically. In fact, the total increase in use of fossil fuels, if it were just oil, is equal to 6 Saudi Arabia's worth of energy production over the last 20 years, new production. So the race is on the fuel economies inexpensively and reliably. And, China's the biggest oil importer now. They're a massive importer of natural gas. What they are not an importer of are the critical minerals and metals needed to make windmills and solar panels and batteries that we subsidize and buy Chinese materials and products to build them and assemble them here. It's not a great trade, geopolitically or economically.
And something that, going back to Joe Ross's talk, which I assume he got from you, just to provide some perspective on this energy discussion, and those who are, like California, trying to ban the combustion engine and so forth, all EVs, the EV mandates, which I know has now been rescinded, but the debate rages on. Ross said that if you eliminated half the cars on the planet, it would only reduce fossil fuel consumption by 10%.
Wow. Yeah, he's specifically talking about oil use, but that's
right. Oil use,
right. If we go from the sort of about 15 million EVs in the world out of a total vehicle stock on the planet of 1.5 billion, so 1,500 million cars in the world today, there'll be 2,000 million cars in the world in 20 years. If half of those end up being electric, which is not conceivable because there's not enough copper in the world right now. But even if that were to happen, it would reduce global oil use by less than 10%. Global oil use. So that's a lot, by the way, in oil markets. If you swing demand by 10%, big shifts in price. But it's not the end of oil. That's the point. There are going to be lots more EVs, and with a little luck, we won't be subsidizing them with taxpayers' money anymore. As you know, and it's been widely written and researched, even from analysis from UC Berkeley, the vast majority of subsidies are a transfer of wealth from the middle class to the rich. The rich buy EVs, and the middle class pay most taxes.
I wanted to get your reaction to this op-ed in the Wall Street Journal by the CEO of TC Energy, a company that, according to him, moves roughly 30% of the natural gas consumed in North America. And he talks about the opportunity that's present right now with Canada getting into the LNG market, the opportunity for sort of a unified collaboration in North America between Mexico, the United States, and Canada when it comes to LNG, and as consistent with sort of Trump's policy of not enriching our enemies by buying oil from Venezuela or Russia or Europe buying natural gas from Russia. This is an opportunity to advance our collective economy in North America while defenestrating enemies of a free people.
It's financially defenestrating, of course, because the economies that sell oil and gas to the world that are not our friends make a lot of money, and they use that money to buy weapons and hurt us and our friends. But I have been an advocate of a no borders free trade energy agreement between Canada, the United States, and Mexico for a long time, from well over 15 years. I published a study 15 years ago titled "The North American Energy Colossus," presenting the idea that we could have tariffs of manufactured products of all kinds of. You could imagine that for all kinds of reasons. But when it comes to energy, it's so important that it would be, and I may be a tad idealistic here. I am a realist, but this may sound a tad idealistic. Because borders are artificial by definition when it comes to resources. We own them and they own them. But the infrastructures, pipelines, and transmission lines, the highways and things, ways we can move goods and materials for energy around. Ideally, we would do it in the optimum way, in an economically optimum way. If we did that, the North American continent would become the utterly overwhelming primary supplier to the world for its energy it's going to need to grow and drag people out of poverty. You know this data. I'm sure all your listeners know. The billion people in Europe and the United States live luxurious lives compared to the 6.5 billion people everywhere else. They would like to live something closer to our lives, taking vacations, having cars, air conditioning, normal cooking and heating. They'll take astonishing quantities of energy, inexpensively produced. It is not an exaggeration to say that there is no better domain in terms of resources and technology capability to do that than North America. The United States is the biggest player in that, but it's good to have allies, and I remain stubbornly optimistic that we'll get to something like that in this next iteration as we renormalize away from this. We'll call it a dream. It's really it's a form of mythology to think that we can replace fossil fuels with wind, solar, and batteries. It's not happening. Well, it can't happen given the physics and economics of energy systems. And the sooner we stop pretending there's going to be a transition, but rather there'll be additions to energy sources, the sooner we'll get back to a normal behavior that will be economically, geopolitically beneficial. But yeah, it'd be great to Canada's. It's my homeland. I'm both flavors now, Canadian and American. Vast resources and a tenth the number of people. And is already a major exporter. It could expand.
Well, let's talk about that alternative energy of windmills. I mean, they are popping up everywhere around this country, around the world. Do they generate any power? Is there any saving grace to these things?
Well, sure. It's like every technology or resource in particular. It depends where you are. To be simplistic, there's no value to really planting wheat in the Sahara Desert. I mean, you can if you irrigate it a lot and spend a lot of money, but it produces very expensive wheat. Wheat grows well in the Great Plains of America and Canada because of geography and the nature of where it is on the planet. So that's a long way of saying there are places where a very significant penetration of wind makes sense, and there are many places where significant penetration doesn't make sense. The most important point is not whether they can produce useful and inexpensive electricity. It's what share of a grid, how much of the share of electricity can wind realistically and economically produce. And that varies, again, geographically. It can be as much as 20 or 30% some places. It could be only 10% in others. The problem is obvious, right? When the wind's blowing, the wind-produced electricity is very cheap. When the wind's not blowing, of course, it's essentially infinitely priced because there's none, which is bad. And how you back that up is where the real rubber meets the road, where the economics make wind become extremely difficult to supply reliable electricity as a primary source of electricity. So I'm not on the. I think what's happened is that people have become over-enthusiastic, the wind advocates, in thinking it's going to be easy to make wind the primary source of electricity. Whereas the people who dislike windmills, and many dislike them for aesthetic reasons, which I am sympathetic to, filling the entire horizon with Washington Monument-sized machines is not, for a lot of people, very pretty. And so there are aesthetics considerations as well as just economics. Bottom line is they produce electricity. If you ask the question this way, would you want a car? Would you pay for a car that was very cheap when it was running, but you didn't know when it would start? And you have to buy a second car to be always available. But it's a car you don't really like, and it uses a fuel you don't really like. But you have to have two cars now. I mean, that's the essence of wind.
Well, that's about the best metaphor for wind power I've heard. Mark Mills is the founder and executive director of the National Center for Energy Analytics. Mark, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. Take care.
Yeah, thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's what Chicago is talking about. It's Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy on AM 560. The Answer.
Well, it was during a 10, 12-inch snowstorm, and we probably shouldn't have been delivering, but we were delivering.
Ben and Arvid Huth, brothers and owners of Penny Mustard Furnishings.
And they get to the end of the driveway, and it's a long driveway, like a quarter mile long, and it has been plowed. And the UPS guy was stuck halfway between